Hello, kia ora everyone. Welcome along to a live session of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Gosh, it feels like so long since live sessions. As you know, we had our summer holiday, we had our Christmas time and took a little bit of a break. I've pulled back a little bit because I'm now doing some work outside of the podcast. I'm really hoping to get involved in care, embracing the hospice community, things like that. So it's been a little bit of time since we've been here live, and I have to say I'm excited to be back here with today. So a warm welcome to you all, wherever you are coming in the world. We are going to be recording this. This is going to go out as our episode for today. So kia ora to everybody and a huge warm welcome to our live episode. Today, we've got somebody very special joining us. We've got Dr. Lotte. So Dr. Lotte, welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me as a guest.
It's wonderful because if you don't know already, Dr. Lotte came in. She was a guest quite some time ago, probably a couple of years ago now, wasn't it? And so much has happened in that time. So we've brought her back in. She's doing some amazing work. And I think today we're just going to have an amazing conversation together. So a formal introduction for Dr. Lotte. And from there, we can go into some amazing conversation. If you're tuning in live, you are welcome to jump in and type your comments, your questions, feedback in for us. We will acknowledge that as we go along. If you're watching the replay, a massive warm welcome to you on the replay. And also you can always come back to us after the live session with your questions, and we will do our very best to answer them as much as we can. So the official introduction, now I'm looking up slightly so I can read it properly. Dr. Lotte Valentin, the intuitive physician, is an N.M.D, an author, a medical intuitive, an evidential medium, ancestral healer, and international keynote speaker. She is a 2-time near-death experiencer, which resulted in her becoming clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient, and activating her life path. She was guided to attend medical school and was accepted at age 54. And I just think you're so incredibly brave. I know you probably got a little bit of help from the other side, but you're so brave to start medical school at 54. We will talk about that a little bit more as we get into this. And Dr. Lotte also has her own podcast. It's called Science with Soul, and it helps people to create a path to healing through life physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and to bridge the gap between science and soul. So again, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for being here. It is exciting to chat about all the things that you've been doing, because I know when we chatted last time, the podcast wasn't up and running. Your work was a little bit different. You've been doing so many things. So, God, where do we begin? I guess we will begin your near-death experiences. Are you happy to give us a little bit of an overview experiences for those who maybe don't know the stories, don't know the background, and then we can use them to the work that you're doing today and open up for some Q&A?
Absolutely. I had 2 near-death experiences, one in 1992 and one in 1994. And the first one happened in the emergency room, and I hemorrhaged to death. I had been hemorrhaging for 3 days, and that happened in the ER. And then the second one, as a result of the first near-death experience, I then developed a blood disorder. And I had something called bone marrow suppression, and I wasn't making enough white blood cells, red blood cells, or platelets. So I would get sick all the time, and I would have bruises. And that second near-death experience is really what activated my life path, because during that second experience, I went to the unconditional white light that many has heard about. And I saw an outline of angels in the white light, and which is interesting in itself, because I still did not believe in angels, or, maybe that first near-death experience was just something my brain did. I'm just such a scientist that I had a really hard time accepting what happened. And I thought maybe maybe I'm just going crazy, even though I started hearing the spirit world and everything started right after the first near-death experience, but I kept doubting it. So here I am in the second near-death experience, and I saw it was this most beautiful music that came from this white, bright light that was just unconditional love. And there was also a knowing that I am the light and I come from that light. I carry the light within me and I will return to that light. We are part of that unconditional love. And then there were two spirit guides that came, and they told me I had to go. This first spirit guide said, you have to go back. And I said, no. Wait a second. How can I be outside my body and still be me? Because I've already been thinking about this for 2 years, thinking I'm crazy. And here I am one more time. It's like the spirit world was like, okay, let's give her another near-death experience. Let's make sure she gets on that right track. So the two spirit guides showed me. So it was like a movie screen that just appeared, and they showed, it was like I'm standing on the moon looking down on the earth. And around the earth was this, what I called like a fish net, because it was this diamond shaped, silvery, glittery net that surrounded the earth. But then the spirit guide said, everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that knowledge, I was sent back. It was just, okay, you've been gone too long, you got to go back. So they sent me back, and it's really taken me, and it took me like a quarter of a century to really truly understand what they meant and how we are interconnected and how we are all just one, because we are all connected, and we are all connected up to the spirit world. And we think we are walking this, path on earth as individuals, but that is really just an illusion, because that is how we have to experience life in order to make our own choices and have our own experience. But when you leave your body, then you understand that, oh, we're all connected. We're all one. We're all part of this consciousness of Earth itself and all of humanity, all animals, all trees. And Earth itself is a living organism in the universe itself. And we're just part of the Earth. So that is my near-death experience in a nutshell. So,
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. We've got a little bit of echo. I hope you can't hear that there. I'm actually not quite sure. I have a load of questions. If you have questions, pop them into the comments box. My question first is, someone who's got such a scientific background, who likes the explanation of all of everything there, when you saw the grid, the diamond shape, and you're not the first person who's told me about this, I've heard about this from quite a few other people as well. What do you think of that? What was going through your mind? How do you explain that?
But when I was outside my body and I saw the grid,
or were you able to? Well, I mean, in the moment, was it that you just understood, and so you didn't need to question, or?
No, it was just, it's more just a deep knowledge, a deep understanding that this is how it is. But then I come back to my body and I know what they told me, but then scientifically, how does this work? Right? So I'm constantly questioning, well, how can we be connected? I know that he told us we're all connected, and we're all connected to the grid. So lots of research. And I went through half of the San Francisco Public Library looking for something that would tell me about this grid, all these different departments. I could never find anything. So eventually I gave up. I had stacks of books in my house looking for information on this. I was looking in the physics department and, reading Stephen Hawking's books. And can he explain this to me? And there is no time on the other side. How can there not be any time on the other side? And that is just something we experience here on the earth. But it wasn't until 2013, I think it was, 2013, I was second year in med school. And I had never told my daughter the whole story, and she is my third child, and she is the one who was born, and it was after her birth that I hemorrhaged. But I had never told her this whole story. So I told her the story about the grid, and she looks at me and she says, Mom, that grid is on the internet. You can just Google it. So, but I went through this whole experience of trying to understand it before the internet was in place. So there was no Google back then. There was no way of finding that information. And then I had just given up on it. And I said, okay, whatever, I'm just going to leave it. And then it didn't all come back until 2013. And then all of a sudden, I started, learning about other people. I found IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I think that was in 2012. And I started realizing that all these other people had had similar experience to my own. And it was the first time that I realized I wasn't really crazy. All these years, even though I started hearing the spirit world and I became clairvoyant, it's just a coincidence, right? I would just reason it and saying it can't be this way. But then after 12 years of constantly being shown things, and then they happen. This person is sick, and then it happens. This person's going to die, it happens. We're going to be in a car accident, it happens. And it was just constant. And so after 12 years of this, I finally said, okay, I get it. I'm listening. I can hear now. But it takes a long time. And I always, meet people who have had near-death experiences, and then after 5 years, they've already sort of incorporated it. And I think to myself, wow, it really took me 12 years just to accept it. And then it took another 12 years to really integrate the knowledge that I learned from my near-death experience, to integrate that into my life, right? Because we always try to find meaning in why did I have to have this experience? And I look at it as, this is the ticket I got. Right. So I'm up there. I'm up there in the spirit world with my sticky notepad, and I'm writing down, well, in this life, I'm going to sign up for a near-death experience. Right. So I, put that note on me. And then I said, oh, I'm also going to have, I'm going to marry someone, but it's going to be the wrong person. So I put that one. And then as you go through life and you have these experiences and you resolve them, it's like you took that note off and you get rid of it. And then you go through the next problem and you take that note off and you're done with that one. And I always talk about how we incarnate with a backpack full of these sticky notes. And as we go through life and we resolve these problems, we get rid of the sticky note and we throw that one out. Oh, it's only 45 to go, right? I have until I'm like 96 or whatever my due date is for checkout. And we go through life and we resolve these problems. But sometimes that sticky note is just stuck and we can't get it off, right? The sticky note, you keep trying to resolve the problem and that you can't get it off. Why can't I get this note off me? And that is really what led me into, I know we're going to talk about ancestral healing, but many times when I work with people as a medical intuitive or medical medium, we end up in the ancestral healing portion because people will tell me, I've had this problem for 15 years and I've tried everything. I tried all the drugs. I tried all the supplements. I saw a naturopathic doctor. I saw a functional medicine doctor. I saw the acupuncturist. They tried everything. The problem is still there. And that's because it's tied to the ancestral lineage. And I always say, okay, well, so you incarnated with this ticket that says, I'm here to heal my ancestral lineage. And that's why they ended up on that path of having to endure this emotional problem, spiritual problem, or a physical problem for a long time until finally they, land in my lap or somebody else's lap that can help resolve that problem.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness, so much in there. I find it really hard not to just actually jump on my phone while we're talking because I want to search the internet. When your daughter said, that's on the internet, right? To go and have a look at that. But you're right that I think we all take a different amount of time to accept our experience, to integrate it. And I can't help but wonder, when you're having these experiences, you're hearing from you're hearing voices or you're hearing other things, having these experiences which you maybe didn't have before that first near-death experience, it's pretty easy to question, am I okay? Is there something not quite right? Did I come back slightly off from that? And then to see that comes through into the work that you're doing today is absolutely amazing. If somebody was here and they're listening to this and perhaps they've had their experience as well in this way, they're having voices, or you would say, I'd know that there was going to be a car accident and then there would be, or I'd know this was going to happen and then it would happen. How do we start to deal with that?
How do we start to deal with our own intuition and knowing that we're correct?
Yeah, how do we trust that?
I would say it takes time and everybody's different, but I talk about it in my book. So I wrote this book, which is called Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul. And it actually just won an award in the spiritual leadership category. And this award recognizes like truly world-changing books that bring, positive global change. But in this book, I talk about my near-death experiences, but also how do you deal with that? How do you bring out those intuitive abilities that we all have? We are intuitive spiritual creatures, right? Everybody has intuition. I knew my mom was going to call, or I knew this was going to happen. But then we sort of push it down and we, say, oh, it was just a coincidence or something, right? We explain it away. And it's just a matter of really tuning into, trusting it. And the way I did it, and I talk about it in the book, to help other people, tune into their own abilities. And when you have, let's say you see something or you hear something or you just have a knowing that something is going to happen. And it could be something silly, like, I know I'm going to meet my friend, Sylvia at the gym today. Write it down. And then when you go to the gym, if you meet your friend Sylvia at the gym, then you're not going to explain it away saying, oh, it was just a deja vu, because you wrote it down. And you can go back and say, okay, I did write it down. Okay, I'm not crazy. I did have a knowing about something. So every time you get these messages or intuitive feelings about something, write it down. Or if you don't have pen and paper, tell your child or tell your partner or your friend, I'm having this moment and this is what I'm experiencing, because that way you can then go back and verify it and say, okay, I'm not crazy. It wasn't a deja vu. Yeah. But it's just it just takes practice really to trust it. And like I said, for me, it took a good 25 years to really, really trust it and know that this is how it is, right? And but now when I work, I always work with the spirit world, because the spirit world is just part of my life, is to be working with the spirit world. So it doesn't matter what I do. If I work as a physician or I work as a medical medium or a ancestral healer, the spirit world is always there. And when I trained at Arthur Findlay College in England, which is where a lot of famous mediums have trained, my teachers will say you have 1 foot on earth and 1 foot in the spirit world. It's like you're straddling the two sides. And that's a really good description, because that's really what my life has become. The spirit world is always there. They're always with me. And I just get information when I work with people. Sometimes they'll show me a picture. I'll say, is this how your mom was? Or I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that. Does this make sense to you? And it goes a lot faster. I always say it's like I'm cheating a little bit, because I've help from the spirit world. I don't have to go through as many questions when I work as an ancestral healer, because you actually train in ancestral healing. It's a way, it's a counseling method. So I actually trained with other physicians and counselors. Now, granted, I trained as a counselor to go through medical school, because we have to be able to diagnose people with mental conditions and then, prescribe medication or send them along to a psychiatrist for further evaluation. So you do get that training in medical school. And then I trained in ancestral healing. So I have those tools of how, as a counselor, I would dissect it and see, is this a problem that this person is experiencing themselves from their own childhood or traumatic event? Or is it something that was passed down via DNA, or as I call it, the energetic grid or the subconscious mind. And then we work, from there to resolve whatever it is. So
I love how you normalize it, just make it every day. You're talking about your feet are in one in the physical world, one in the spiritual world, just how normal it is for you.
mm-hmm.
How do you think, going back, do you think that you needed to have a near-death experience to be able to tap in and make this your normal everyday life? Do you think that that was significant in that, or what would have happened if you hadn't have had that near-death experience? Do you think you'd be doing the work that you're doing today?
Absolutely not. That was one of my sticky notes that I wrote before I incarnated, and I wrote all my sticky notes from my backpack. That was on my sticky note. And, you're going to go through life. You're going to be a true scientist and very methodical, and you're not going to believe in anything. Complete atheist. When you die, it's black. That's it. There is no afterlife. There is no spirit world. And that was my belief until I had my near-death experiences. So it really changed how I view the world. And I think that, there's no way I would do what I'm doing today. All my work and going to med school when I was 54, writing a book and I really wrote the book for the people, because the spirit world actually gave me the title of the book. Because the title of the book is Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul. But it's really a book about healing and transformation and spirituality to help other people heal and become more intuitive. And it's also, the title was given to me by the spirit world. And they said, no, it has to be called Med School After Menopause, because it's to help women specifically to understand that life does not end just because you entered menopause. Life can begin. This is your, last third of your life. Now you have a chance, for many women that have worked and raised kids or stayed home with the kids. Now the kids are typically older. They probably have moved out. You're entering menopause. But the way we looked at menopause when I grew up, those women are old women. They can't do anything. They're just going to sit in a rocking chair and knit all day, right? Or crochet, or not really be, productive in society. But our life expectancy has changed dramatically just in the last 50 years or so. So now you have to assume that you're probably going to be 100, right? So when you hit menopause around age 50, you haven't even lived half of your adult life, because you're not even an adult until you're 21. So now you have the chance of going after the things that you might not have had a chance to do before. And you've got a good 50 years left. So even if you're only working until you're, let's say, 80, and then you take a pension the last 20 years. But that is the same amount of time you have already lived as an adult. So it is to inspire other women and know that just because you're entering that midlife, this is your chance to really break out of that, get back in shape, go back to school. And it doesn't matter so much what you do in the beginning if you haven't been in school for, let's say, a long time. I tell people, just take any class at a community college, basket weaving, coloring, piano, anything just to get you back on campus and start blending in with the younger population, feel what it's like. And then, take an easy course. If you know what you want to do, take something that's easy. Take an easy English class or history class, just to sort of get back in the groove. And you might not be familiar with all the new software and how to download things and PDFs and Excel spreadsheets, and everything is PowerPoints now in school, right? When I went to college in the 1980s, we had textbooks. The teachers wrote on the blackboard, right? Now you go to college or med school, everything is PowerPoints and everything is download. And the classes, the speed of the classes are very, very different from when I went to college in the 80s, because you had time to look at the window and think about stuff because the teacher wrote so slowly on the board. But now the teacher walks around with a clicker, one PowerPoint, next slide. And like going through medical school, we had about every day started with a 4-hour lecture from 8 to 12 every day. And then the other classes in the afternoon and into the evening. And those lectures were about, on average, about 50 PowerPoint slides an hour. So you have 2 PowerPoint slides every day. So it's 1,000 PowerPoint slides in a week. And then they'll say, we're going to have a quiz. We're going to give you 10 questions. You have to have 7 right out of the 10 on these 1,000 PowerPoint slides.
Mm.
You know, that's what it's like. And that's the speed that the information is moving. Obviously, undergraduate is very different. It doesn't move at the speed, but it's a matter for people just, you know, that want to do something or change their course. Don't be afraid. Just go for it. Take something easy. It's baby steps. And these baby steps lead to bigger steps. And it's just a matter of setting things in motion. And then things just start, you know, you pass one class. That wasn't so bad. I can do another one. And you gain confidence as you go along.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I think it's so good because I'm all about that, of little baby steps get us somewhere. You know, if we do nothing, we go nowhere, but baby steps get us somewhere. I can't help but wonder, we're going to get to some questions very soon, but I can't help but wonder these sticky notes. And again, what a visual way to represent that. You're literally sticking the sticky notes on you. When you first did that, I wondered if maybe we stuck the same sticky note on 100 times, but you said it actually gets stuck where we can't take it off. So that was great. That answered that question for me. Do you think that we can change the sticky notes? If we start going to college, like you've just said, if we were to go and do a baby step, can we rewrite all of the sticky notes that are there? Or how does that all kind of work, do you think?
I think the sticky notes contain information or lessons that you are supposed to learn in this life. Now, there are different ways that you could learn that same lesson. So you still have free will, right? So I choose to take this class, or I choose to major in this subject in college, right? And then you still have that free will, but then the ultimate lesson was something else. And then I think there are different paths that lead to that same lesson. And so we have, let's say you have like your hand and you're standing at this crossroad, and at each of these points, these are your free wills. At each point, it's the same lesson to be learned. You could go down here and be homeless. You can go down here and be rich and go through divorce. And you can go this one, that here you're going to be sick, right? So you have all these different opportunities, but what you're going to learn from the different experiences ultimately is the same. So all the roads lead to the same lesson. That's how I look at it. So you have the sticky notes contain the lesson to be learned, right? The path.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For me, it's like, I was picked up, okay, you're on the wrong track. You chose this path, right? So now we're going to give you a near-death experience because you majored in business and computer science in college, and then you worked as a systems analyst and programmer for IBM, right? And then I started having kids, and the spirit world was like, she's going down the wrong track. We got to, now she's on this track, so we're going to have to give her the near-death experience to make her go back over here because she's supposed to be working, healing people and helping other people heal. That's how I look at it, because that knowing that I was a healer was always with me since I was, as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a doctor. So my father was an N.M.D, was a family practitioner. My mom went back to school and became a hospital floor administrator. And one of my brothers became a surgeon. All my parents' friends, all the men were doctors, all the females, 95% of them were nurses. So my whole childhood, my whole upbringing was medicine. Every conversation, every dinner conversation, every breakfast conversation was always about medicine. So I was raised in that, and I wanted to be a doctor, but then I fell in love with an American, and I said no. And also, when I was in junior high, in high school, we major in Sweden because I was raised in Europe. And so you major in science. It's basically, if you know you want to be a doctor, you take the pre-med classes in high school, and then you go straight to medical school. You don't do the 4 years of college like we do in the United States. And I looked at the 2 or 3 young women or, teenagers that were going to be in science line. And I said, I'm never going to have any friends, right? And you're a teenager, you're 14, 15 years old. And I said, no, it's more important to, be popular or get a boyfriend and all those things that teenagers tend to think about. And I was a typical teenager in that way. So I majored in business and languages in high school. And then I met an American and fell in love and came to the United States. And then again, after being in the States for a year, I worked as a secretary while my husband finished his senior year. I worked as a secretary in Boston University in the biomedical engineering department in the engineering school. And I didn't even know what I was typing. I was typing research papers for the professors there. I had no idea. I was just typing because I didn't know English that well. And after a year, these professors said, oh, you have such a knack for computer science. You should go to engineering school or, computer science. And so I ended up transferring. I was already at Stockholm's University in Sweden for a year and a half. And I transferred into Boston University and majored in business and computer science. And I again thought, maybe I should be a nurse. My dad said, just be a nurse. It doesn't take so long. And I didn't really want to be a nurse. And with the language barrier, I decided, no, that's too hard. The science is too hard. And let me just do business and computer science. So then, I go through life and I do all these things. It's more out of convenience and I'm not listening to my heart. Because in my heart, since I was a young girl, I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but it never happened because of the circumstances. And I took the easy road. I said, no, it's too hard. Let me do this. I know I can succeed here. That's too scary. That's too hard. Right. But so in my book and the things that I teach people is get rid of that mind, listen to the heart, because it is your heart that truly knows what it wants. But our mind gets in the way of the heart. Right? When our mind will reason and say, oh no, it's too hard, it's too expensive, you're too old, you're too this, you're too that. And we don't do it and we explain it away. But it's a matter of not listening to the mind, but really tuning into that heart. If you didn't have a mind, if your heart made your decisions, what would that decision be? And that's what you have to tune into. And I talk a lot about it in my book as well. How do you move from the mind to the heart and then use the heart to make your decisions?
Yeah. Oh, love it. I talk quite a lot about a voice because there's the voice which got me here to doing this podcast, which has led me through my whole life. I haven't always followed it and I can go all around trying to avoid it to get right back to what I needed to do in the beginning anyway. So I love what I think we learn to recognize the voice or what the heart's speaking to us. And I just think life's so much more exciting when we can do that. So I totally resonate. Okay, I'm going to jump over to some questions because they're coming in and we haven't even got there because I always have a million and I'm sorry, I will do that. Okay, so GK Jensen says, love. We've got Alan saying, hello. Jess, I have read your message. Just send me an email and we can work that out. We've got a few little spam things in here. Okay. It said that perfect love must be perfectly holy. Did Dr. Lotte understand holiness as part of the light and love of God?
Yes, I did. Absolutely. I have a hard time fitting into any religion because in the end, we the people wrote the religion. But God itself is bigger than any religion. And if I was going to call the light something, I would call it God because I was raised Christian. But that's not to say that calling it God would be the only right way of what to call that. To me, it's the divine presence of all that is, and different religions have different names for it.
Okay, I hope that is helpful. Thank you. There's a follow-on question for that, which is perfectly. What is perfectly holy?
What is perfectly holy? It's the unconditional love of that light, because there is a knowing that we are part of that divine creation, which then you could say, who made the world? God made the world, or the divine spiritual essence made the world, whatever we want to call it. But we are holy creatures because we are made from that, and we are part of that divine divinity.
I like that. Thank you. I think part of that comes back to the connectedness. When you saw mesh, when you saw that we're all connected to the work, to something greater. Do you have a personal thing that you like? Do you talk about God or source or spirit, or do you have a label for?
Yeah, if I have a label, it would be source. I often talk about source. It's easier to say something like that so that we don't divide. We have wars in the world based on our religions. There is no right or wrong religion. Again, the religions were made by the people in those areas of the world to help those people become better people. But it's not that one religion is right and all the other religions are wrong, because God is bigger than that, or the source is bigger than that. It's bigger than any religion. It is divine, unconditional love for all people, not just the people who read the Bible or the people who read the Quran or people who, aspire to one religious belief or another. It is religion. It's not, it creates, we divide the people on the earth when we say that this religion is right, and only the people that aspire to this religion or this belief or read this particular Bible. There's also different versions of the Bible itself, right? So we have to be careful, because I think we are at a part of existing in the world that we need to stop running around and kill each other and start having unconditional love for each other and learn about each other's cultures. And when you look at the religions, many times they're actually quite similar. And I talk about that as well in my book and compare the different religions. In this religion, it says this, and in this religion, it says this. But you know what? It's the same message. But we are afraid as humans of things that we don't know or understand. And so it creates a fear, and that is also instilled in religion. In some religions, it's, you're born, you're a sinner. But we are born, I don't believe that. I believe that we're born as beautiful, unconditional love beings. And, stick with that unconditional love, because the fear is only going to create, war and injustice in the world. Because we have to come together. We are all one. We are all part of the earth.
Absolutely. We've got a few comments around perfect love in a perfect world, life free from evil in this world, and I think it all kind of applies as well. GK Jensen, Lotte, so I presume that's right. Thank you. Now, you've talked about ancestral healing quite a bit. For those who maybe aren't familiar with what that is, or what a session might look like, or how that kind of works, are you happy to jump in and share a little bit more about ancestral healing and to be part of what that actually looks like on a practical level?
Yes. So ancestral healing is the traumatic and unresolved issues that has happened in your family lineage that many times people aren't even aware of until you start digging. So think back to when you were a child and you're at the Christmas dinner table with all your aunts and uncles and cousins, and then one of the younger children says, "Well, what about Uncle Bobby?" And then one of the adults say, "Shh, we don't talk about Uncle Bobby." Right? So something obviously happened and the family is ashamed of it. They've swept it under the carpet. We never talk about that person because some kind of traumatic or embarrassing event happened, or he did something wrong. And so nobody wants to talk about it. But then that is what typically shows up later on. So it is the actions, and the reactions and the interactions of our ancestors that get passed down. And some of these events even get passed down via DNA. So let me go into and tell you briefly about a study, because it will make people understand how it works. So we actually have scientific studies on how we inherit traumatic events. It is scientifically proven. So they did a study back, one of the best studies is a study that was done back in 2013. And it was called epigenetic inheritance from your ancestors' lineage on odor fear conditioning. And they did a study at Emory University School of Medicine, and it was led by Brian Diaz. And what they did is they took mice and then they exposed them to a cherry blossom smell. And every time this little mice smelled a cherry blossom, they would give them an electric shock. So these, every time the mice smell the cherry blossom, they're like, oh, there's the cherry blossom smell, I'm not going there, because that meant an electric shock. So then they took the sperm of these male mice and they artificially inseminated female mice who had never smelled the cherry blossom, who had never been receiving an electric shock. And they artificially inseminated the mice, and then they had pups, little mice pups. And these mice pups who had gotten the sperm from the father that was electrically shocked and feared the cherry blossom smell, these little mice, every time they smelled the cherry blossom smell, would exhibit fear. And not only that, they could see that these mice developed more receptors. It's called an M71 receptor. So they had more receptors, and they could smell this cherry blossom smell at even lower levels because they had been primed to avoid the cherry blossom smell from the male sperm. Even though the mother had never had the shock, the mice had never had the shock. And then those mice had pups. So even the grandpups exhibited the same fear of the cherry blossom smell. And they also had more M71 receptors. So, and we know from research there in the humans, it's the FKBP5 gene is one of them. And there are some other genes too that they have found. And they've done studies on Holocaust survivors, and they can see that it's all the way down to the grandchildren and probably further, but we only have gotten so far with our evolution. But they can see that these gene markers have been flipped by the people who survived the Holocaust, and it goes all the way to the grandchildren. So when you think about this, the way it shows up in life will be somebody will, schedule a session with me and they'll say, well, I have this extreme fear. Let's say I have this extreme fear of sirens. Every time I hear a siren, I get so scared and I get a panic attack, and I don't know why. I never had a traumatic event, right? About sirens or being in a car accident and you would hear the sirens come and you're fighting for your life. No traumatic experience. So it's not their own traumatic life experience. It's coming from somewhere else. So then you find out, well, the grandparent, let's say the grandfather fought in World War II. And every time the sirens went off, he took cover and he knew the bombers were coming. And every time he thought, this is it. This is it. They're flying right over us. This is it. My time has come. This is the day I'm going to die. And so the grandfather flips his genetic markers, his epigenetics. And then in his sperm, then he survives the war. He has children. And then his children has children. And now the granddaughter is having a session and says, I have this fear. Where is it coming from? Well, it actually came from the grandfather. It's the grandfather's fear of thinking that's the day he's going to die. And he flipped those genetic markers. So it's actually an inheritance, epigenetic inheritance via DNA, that you now have the fear of sirens. But when we people go to the doctor, all we do is, oh, you have a panic attack, here's a script, here's some medicine for you, take this for the rest of your life, right? And that's how we deal with it, because we're just now learning about that these events are actually passed down via genetics.
And it totally makes sense to me that it can go generation to generational. It makes sense that we need to tap in spiritually as well. Very much going to the doctor, for me anyway, is very much a physical experience. But what you're saying really resonates for me. There's a message here from Alan. He says, in the Christian belief system, it is taught that ancestral traits and behaviors can affect up to 7 future generations. How far has it been shown to affect future generations in science?
We're up to 3 generations. We're up to 3 generations. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because it's the studies that have been done so far have been on Holocaust survivors, and they're down to the grandchildren. So when they have children, then we'll probably get to the 4th generation. But it's true. It's when you work with it like shamanically or spiritually, it's often 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. And so when you work to heal it, once you understand where your problem is coming from, this is the interesting part. So let's say you have these panic attacks and the sirens, but once you understand, oh my gosh, this is not mine, this is my grandfather's fear, then all of a sudden you can create healing for that, and you can heal it. And sometimes, miraculous things happen within 24 hours. It goes away, and you don't have this fear anymore, because you realize it wasn't yours from the beginning. It was just something you inherited. And now you just release it. You change your own epigenetic expression via your own actions, reactions, and interactions. So you're affected by your ancestors' actions, reactions, and interactions, but then how you then react to it when you figure out where it comes from, you change your reaction and interaction and action based on that. And so now you're changing the epigenetics and DNA and the expressions of, all your physiological expressions in your body. So when you think about how this works, if I took you to the jungle and I said, okay, I'm just going to park you right here. I just got to go back and get this thing I forgot. And you're sitting there on a log, and here comes a lion. You're not going to think, I need to dilate my pupils, I need to increase my heart rate and my blood pressure because I need to run really fast from this lion. Yeah. It's just going to happen automatically. Your system knows what to do to get you to safety. But that same aha moment is created when you work with ancestral healing. Because once you see and understand where this problem is coming from, where it has its roots, where it originated, then the healing is just there. It just happens. It's that aha moment. And all of a sudden it's like, just like when you run from the lion, you're not thinking about it, you just do it. But it's the same thing that happens. And so all those expressions, chemical reactions, and the way you flip your own gene markers and, have reactions in your own body, that changes as soon as you understand it. So it's really incredible, the healings that can happen when you work with ancestral healing. But many times people sign up for a medical intuitive session and it just goes in whatever direction. So, sometimes it turns out that the medical problem they're experiencing is actually an ancestral problem.
And so is there a place where you would take somebody into a regression, or you want them to relieve that ancestral behavior, that pattern? Or is every ancestral thing something that we can do ourselves? Can we heal ourselves from that?
I would think it's really hard to heal yourself, because you need help to understand where it's coming from, because the way we inherit things could be from mom or dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, siblings, even other people that have come across the path. It could be the father's first wife, the stillborn baby. It takes quite a bit of dissecting to get to the bottom of the problem. So it's really hard to do it yourself without working with somebody who knows what they're doing or knows what it is that you're looking for. You're looking for that thread of the problem they're experiencing tied to somebody in that family system, and that it's actually not coming from their own experiences.
Okay. And how would this play into reincarnation, where potentially we're carrying our own patterns through different lifetimes? Is that a similar thing to ancestral healing?
I would say so, because maybe you were your own great grandmother.
Yeah.
Maybe the problem you're experiencing now is actually coming from you 4 or 5 generations back when you were that person. Because when you look at it, the egg that came from your mother's ovaries that you were made from, she made that egg when she was a 20-week-old fetus in your grandmother's abdomen. So what happened to your grandmother when your mom was a 20-week-old fetus in your grandmother's womb? And what happened to grandma's mom when grandma made her eggs in grandmother's womb? Because that's the DNA she's carrying that she's then sending on to your mom, which that she then sent on to you. So see the stream. So if you, for example, were your own great grandmother's mother, maybe you're actually just resolving your own problems that you created.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
It takes a lot to get better on that, doesn't it? I mean, it's so big, and it really opens up the conversation for me. We could go down a rabbit hole, I won't, around souls and around whether we stay within the same families when we reincarnate. And, you know, there's so many bigger questions there. And I love that we've just tapped into it enough for me to think about that a whole lot over the next few days. But I'm going to we've got a question here, which I think is quite important. It says, this is from Goha, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Have there been any studies to explain suicide? Where is this coming from, and why is it more prevalent in some families? Now, I think that's an excellent question.
Yeah. I think there are many different, there's never just one reason, right? So you have to look at the person that incarnated had maybe 3 different ways they were going to die in this life. And that was one option. Maybe they incarnated to commit suicide so that the other people that took care of them their soul would grow. And so they sacrificed their life for the growth of others. Right. And, or maybe it's ancestrally, maybe it's, we are somehow entangled with our ancestors, and there are many different ways we can be entangled with our ancestors. And maybe there is an entanglement there that is coming down the line, right? Of this, and, you know, and the soul families, like you were mentioning, the soul family is incarnating together, and this same problem tends to repeat. And that is because when you look at it ancestrally, there are different ways that we take on problems. We sometimes take on problems, let's say with a mother. The mother is married to an alcoholic, and this father is abusive. And so the daughter of the family says, I'm going to align with my mom. I'm going to experience the same things my mom is experiencing, because this all happens subconsciously. So then she rejects her father. She doesn't like her father. He is abusive. He's an alcoholic, and she doesn't like it. But then she still marries somebody who is very much like her father. He's also abusive. He's also an alcoholic. And that is because whenever you reject something of your, let's say your parents, she rejected her father. She invites that back into her life so that she can create healing for it. She then also aligns with the mother, because she is saying, okay, I'm going to take a piece of your problem and experience the same problems you experienced in your relationship with dad. I'm going to experience the same thing. And it keeps going down the line. And so the same thing with any problem, even suicide, it keeps coming back into the family lineage until it gets resolved and healed, because the problem that causes that is not being resolved. So there are many different ways looking at it,
So interesting. Thank you. I hope. Another question here. How do you marry ideas of soul and DNA?
Because what we're seeing is, so the science, if you're thinking of my podcast, science with soul, right? So the DNA, we're thinking of it as very scientifically, but what we're seeing is that we actually inherit, behavioral trauma experience, emotional experiences from our ancestors. We're not just inheriting the color of our hair, the color of our skin. We're inheriting trauma from our ancestors. And so there is this merge of science that is now merging with soul and the way we experience life. It is becoming, science is helping us prove how magic our existence really is.
That's so interesting, isn't it? It's wonderful. Sandy just has a little comment here. Thank you for asking this. I think she's finding it interesting, which is hugely interesting. I can't help but go back to the little sticky notes that you're putting on yourself. How do they play into ancestral healing? Do we get a sticky note that says you're going to come up against this pattern, this piece that needs healing that's come down from generations? Is that something that we need to work through, or is that one of those learning points on the hand and we have to go up the pathway to have that learning moment?
I think, well, everybody has the free will, right? But if you took the sticky notes before you incarnated that said, I'm taking the sticky note, I'm going to go in and create ancestral healing for my family lineage. That is one of my tasks, right? Because many times when I work with people, some people have had incredibly traumatic, incredibly traumatic life, many traumatic events of different kinds. And they're the only one in their entire family lineage that understands that this is something ancestral going on, because I keep seeing these problems happening over and over, and everybody's an alcoholic, or everybody ends up in jail, or people are getting raped, or whatever it is, and it keeps happening, right? And then they end up maybe with a session with me or somebody else, and we can create healing for that. And I would say, you definitely picked that note. You on your sticky notepad, you wrote, I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna create healing for my family lineage, because they're the only one in the whole family that's working on it. And I think that's more typical than having several people work on ancestral healing in the same family. I think it's more typical that it's one person that is signing up for this. I feel called to do this. There's got to be something here. I'm going to create healing, because the spirit world knows and feels when we send them healing. Yeah. So that 7 generations back and 7 generations forward I absolutely believe in that, because we know that the spirit world feels it. When we send them healing and love, they feel it on the other side. So that we are connected, because the spirit world is it's an ongoing life. There is no such thing as death. Life is eternal. And we just leave this little shell, our body shell. We step outside and we're still there, right? So we're still going to feel the love that the people that are in their bodies now send, because we are just living in this little box, the box body, as I call it, because we can't, we have those little tiny windows, we look out, and this is all we can see, because we are inside our body. Our view of the world, we can only see the world through our own lens. It's like we're wearing our own rose-colored glasses, and the way that we interpret and see the world is based on our own, guess what? Actions, reactions, and interactions. So the way you interpret how somebody treats you, or if you're happy about something or sad about something, is based on your own actions, reactions, and interactions. But guess what? That came from your ancestors' actions, reactions, and interactions. So see how we're all tied? It's all tied together. We're all through the lineage, but then we go through life with our little rose-colored glasses trying to figure out life. But depending on what happened to you as a child, and if you have, like an ancestral mother wound, you may have fears of being abandoned, fears of being homeless. You might actually be a very independent person. And many times that comes from the break between the mother and the child. And you might think that your mom was the best mom in the world. And there was nothing wrong with your mom, but there is something there that created that insecure feeling. So that just comes from, your own perception, because that is how you see the world. And then you have an experience of somebody didn't pick you up. Let's say somebody's late. They're 15 minutes late to pick you up. And the whole thing was just because they got stuck behind an accident and they left on time. They had all intentions to be on time. But your wound is, I feel abandoned. Nobody cares about me. See, they're late. They're 15 minutes late. They probably forgot about me, right? And those are your own wounds based on your own experiences. But that's what happens when we go through life and we keep pushing each other's buttons. And the people that we attract into our relationships are often really good at pushing those buttons, because that is what's unresolved. And that is what you have invited back in order to try and resolve it.
It's fascinating. And because we all have our things, don't we? We've all got little insecurities or our little issues, things we get hung up on. I've got one final question. We'll need to wrap it up. I've got one final question from me, which is, as the seven, if we're taking, we've got 3 generations at the moment, but if we were to talk about 7 generations, does the trauma or the memory, we want to call it, does that reduce? So the first generation feel it very, very strongly. The second generation, maybe it's, but not quite as much. By the time you would get to the 3rd or 4th, it's starting to peter out. So it's not a major thing in life, or
no,
do you think the generation feels it at the same amount?
It just depends on so many different factors, but it skips a generation. It could be the grandfather that had the trauma, but the son, none of the sons picked it up, but then the grandchildren is the one that picked up the trauma. And it's, in full force with the grandchildren, or maybe the grandchildren's children. And it just skipped all these generations because other generations before them, I always talk about the bucket. You get a bucket when you incarnate, and then whatever mom and dad didn't resolve, they're like, here you go, honey, I'll put it in your bucket. It's in your bucket now. And then grandma's like, oh, you know what? I never resolved this one. Let me give you this one too, honey. So after a while, your bucket's pretty full. You're like, okay. But that's kind of how it is. And so you pick up in different birth orders, depending if you're the firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn, are there 3 girls? Is there a girl and then a boy? So there's certain ways that things tend to get passed down, through the lineage to different birth order of those siblings. So it's just the bucket that you got, and it could come from any generation or any aunt and uncle or stillborn baby, somebody that, died young, died in a car accident. It could be anything that exists within your family system. So you have to really go through it and see where does it make sense and what happened here.
Oh my goodness, it's amazing. It's making me think a lot about our soul purpose. And as we're talking, as I'm listening to you, I'm just feeling, we've got to be a little bit gentle with ourselves. We can be so hard on ourselves, and we can be carrying the bucket with all of this stuff that's not even ours. And it can be heavy, and it can be maybe swishing around. It could be really stinky. We don't know what's in the bucket, but I'm just feeling very much that, I don't know who needs to hear it right now, we need to go a little bit easy on ourselves and understand that things aren't always straightforward, and that they're definitely not the same for everyone, that we get different sizes of buckets. Some of them have little cracks in them, holes. What's in the bucket's going to change, all of these things. And I'm just feeling that very strongly right now. So Lotte, I want to say a huge thank you. I have learnt so much from you. I know there's a bunch of people on here as well who have learnt loads. There's some beautiful comments coming in. I'm just going to put your website up at the bottom there if you're watching the video version. You want to go along to drlotte.com, so drlotte.com. If you want to find out more information about her work, about all of the things we've talked about today, if you want to get some ancestral healing, pop along there, because I think it's amazing. I've known Dr. Lotte for a few years now, and I absolutely believe in her work. I think she's doing outstanding stuff. And please do not forget to go over to Science with Soul, her podcast, and that has amazing conversations all along these themes about how science interacts with spiritual. And yeah, Dr. Lotte, I just want to say a huge thank you. Thank you for everything you've given us today. It has been wonderful to have you here. If you've enjoyed this, feel free to put in a comment. Feel free to give it a love heart, something like that, just to let her know that you've enjoyed this. And Lotte, I wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.